So today I'm going to talk about carrying a knife. So, for years I did carry a sheath knife. It only weighed 3 ounces, plastic, 4.5-inch shaft. I carried it right here on my pack strap out of the way, but I never used the thing much. Maybe cutting a block of cheese, maybe scarring myself for life on Isle Royal. One day I was cutting some tape, I don't know, medical tape, I can't remember, but I dropped it, and it's just like playing mumbly peg. It stuck right in my leg and stood straight up, and I still have a scar there. So maybe I'd be safer not carrying a knife. But one time I was glad to have it. It was on the PCT, and again, this isn't going to happen to most people, but it was the same year on the AT in the spring that a guy with a machete killed a guy and wounded a woman, and that made big news. And that summer I'd left Mount Hood, Timberline Lodge, had my all-you-can-eat breakfast, filled my belly, and hiked hard that day. And there were very few tent site options, so I had to walk kind of into the dark. And so I was at a high point coming down to a trailhead. I knew it was ahead. I thought, well, there'll be places around that trailhead, it'll flatten out. I mean, sometimes you're just in steep country where it drops right off. It's wooded, it's littered with downfall like you see around here, and you just can't find a place to camp. And so I had to walk into the dark to get to this trailhead, and it was getting foggy, and I ran into a Croatian couple southbound. And I told them, I said, for the next 4 hours you are not going to find a good flat tent site. The one that was available already had 2 tents in it. And I said, it's getting foggy, it's getting dark, it'd be wise to stay back down here at this trailhead. And they said, well, we're down there and there's a guy that scares us down there. And I said, well, come back with me, and we're safe in numbers and I'll deal with him. So they decided not to. He scared them pretty bad, so they kept going. And so then I thought, well, maybe I don't want to deal with this nutcase either. So I went back in the woods as it flattened out just before the trailhead, cleared a little spot because I don't need much room. My tent needs a postage stamp piece of real estate to put up, and I was just getting it all cleared off when I saw them going by on the trail. I was back far enough they didn't see me, but I thought, gosh, I told them to come back with me, and now I'm not there, so I better go. So I got behind them, made some noise so they knew it was me, and we got down there, and they just walked past the guy, and he decided to have a conversation with me. And he didn't seem all that odd, but he looked maybe like a homeless guy staying at that trailhead. He had a truck there with a Pacific Crest Trail sticker on it. But I just passed him by, and we camped away from him pretty close to the parking area. And so everything went well. They were still frightened. They camped so close to my tent that we might as well been sleeping together. And anyway, about 11 o'clock at night, it starts raining a little bit, and this guy starts screaming at the weather gods. Profanity is loud. We could hear him like he was in our tent site. And I got up, and he was still over in his area, which was like a small ridge away from us. And finally he shut up, and about midnight he started again. Only this time he was close. So I got out of my tent. He was right on the ridge above us, screaming into the sky because it was raining. And I told him to shut up and get away from us. But he didn't have a light, so I had my headlamp on, so I had the advantage of blinding him. He didn't have any weapon or anything, but I wasn't going to sleep good that night. He finally went away and shut up. At 2 o'clock in the morning, he's back. He's screaming profanity at the heavens. And so by this time, I've got my knife laying out there. I've got a nice big stick laying out there, and I've got a rock laying right outside my tent. I've got the fly open, I've got my clothes on, I've got my shoes on. I'm just trying to get some sleep, but knowing that I'm not. I didn't know if I was gonna have to paper, rock, or scissors this guy, but I was ready for anything and glad that I had a knife at that time. Eventually, you know, I yelled at him one more time and he went away and never came back. But I didn't sleep well that night, but I was glad to have a weapon. So anyway, then I stopped carrying a knife for a while and just carried my little Swiss Army knife, mini knife, and you know, I saved 3 ounces, big deal. But when I started carrying these poles and making these poles, I just don't even consider this weight. I'm already carrying my dig tool in here, and so putting that knife in there was a no-brainer. It's you know, a nice place to carry it. If I need it, I've got it. It's like no weight, and so for me, I'm back to carrying a, you know, pretty good sized knife, 4.5-inch blade. If I buy a block of cheese in town, I can cut it. If I need it for any reason, I've got it. And you know, again, I'm not gonna impress any ultra lightweight backpackers, which you know, an ultra lightweight backpacker is someone who goes through a TSA check line and they have to do a body cavity check to find their gear. They aren't going to carry this knife. But I'm back to it, and at least for now, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Keep smiling.